Hi, it's Kibby Lee Miller with nonprofitmarketingguide.com, and we are talking editorial calendars for nonprofits. If you need something really simple or just getting started, I recommend that you try an Excel spreadsheet or Google Calendars, and we have a video on that for you. If you're looking for something a little more robust and you really love to-do lists, then I recommend that you try Asana, and we also have a video on that for you. If you need something robust but prefer something more visual, I recommend that you try Trello, and that's what we're going to talk about today. I first tried Trello last year when I decided to get serious about some garden planting in our backyard, and I found it incredibly useful because it's a very visual platform and you can drag pictures in as well as other content. So that was my first experiment with Trello. I've not actually used it at work, but other people certainly use it all the time and love it. So I wanted to give you a sense for some of the different ways we've heard of people using Trello for editorial calendars. So let's go ahead and take a look. In Trello, you start with boards, and so you would likely want to create one board as your editorial calendar board. And then within boards, you have lists. So each of these columns is a list, and then you have individual cards on lists. So one way that you could set this up is to use the lists for your channels. And you can see I have direct mail appeals, email newsletters, email appeals, Facebook and Twitter set up as lists. And then on each of these, we have cards. So you can think of the card as the individual piece of content. And whenever you get an idea for your email newsletter, you would just add a card here. Let's just say this is idea X, and you would add it. And then you could come back and edit it. And you could add more descriptions. You can have an ongoing conversation with other people who have access to the card. All of that activity is tracked here. You could add other people to the card. You can use labels, checklists. We'll look at some of these things here in just a moment. The advantage of setting it up this way, again, is that it's very visual. And so you could open up this lead article, for example, on Ed Story. You could drag and drop photos into this timeline, and those would all appear on the card. So it's a way to kind of gather some of that content. You can use labels in a number of different ways. The way that I'm using them here is to show at what stage in the content development process this card is in. You can also create lists, checklists, to-do lists within each card as well. And the nice thing is that you can reuse these lists. So let's say that you create a list similar to this with your content creation steps that you want everyone to go through when they're drafting new content. We'll say you come to this new idea here on doing this update on fundraising. You could come over to checklist and then copy the items from here, and that checklist will recreate itself onto this idea or this piece of content. As I said, you've got labels here, so you can change the label as the idea phase moves into draft. So let's say this is no longer in the idea phase. You can uncheck it and move it to the draft phase. Maybe you finally reach the point where this has now been approved and you want to change it to published. You can remove it from here. Well, it's been published in the newsletter. Maybe you've decided, you know what, I really want to repurpose that article in a number of different ways on Facebook. I'm just going to take it out of the newsletter now and drop it into Facebook. And now that it's in Facebook, maybe I need to edit some things. So it's not published anymore. Maybe I need to really say this is back in draft and then do some work on how I'm going to chop up that article to make it work for Facebook. Of course, you can also look at your calendar via the calendar mode. And so you can see the dates that you have selected based on how you have labeled your cards. Let's take a look at a different way that you could set up your Trello board. So instead of using your lists as communications channels, you could use them as the content creation process. And you would move each idea that you have through these lists as they progress through your process. So let's say you're doing this new equipment installed at the park idea. Well, since you're using your lists for your content process, you don't need your labels for that anymore. So you could use your labels for different categories, perhaps the channels that you're using. Again, there are all these different combinations and different ways to use these different tools. You want to pick the one that makes the most sense for you. So we would develop our content here and then, make some notes about it. You could link off to the actual file where that content is located. And as you're done with it, you would then move it over here and maybe assign it to somebody else now who needs to look at it, or someone who needs to do the final approval, or now that it's finally approved and ready to be posted. There are a few other little doodads in here. They have these stickers, so you can throw stickers onto things. It's a sort of another form of labeling, potentially. They have what are called power-ups. Some of these you have to pay for, others you can enable that give you a little bit more different ways to look at it. So example, you could see which cards are aging, which things don't have activity on them. You can get people to vote on cards if you're trying to make some decisions about which content to use. So again, there are lots of different ways to use these different tools to create an editorial calendar. I would love to hear how you're using Trello for your editorial calendar, so please leave your experiences and comments and questions below.